here's the thing, these founders that we like, they're like, we will sacrifice a payday for ourselves in the short term to build something that's strong in the long term.
Yeah, they're playing the long game.
Yep, they're playing the long game.
What's up, everyone? Thanks for dropping in another episode of the Path to Freedom podcast, joined by a good friend of mine, Mr. Erik Van Horn. What's up, dude?
Dude, as you were starting, I was just thinking, I have a beef with you. I don't know that you know, but I have a beef with you.
Oh no,
You did something pretty bad.
what's that?
Who's going to edit and record your put your podcast and make it look nice? Yeah, that's right. My boy.
Yeah,
The guy that used to work for me
technically,
is now like, you stole him from me.
Technically, it's your boy's brother. On. It's your little boy's brother who so your boy Caleb, who's I would say a genius when it comes to just all the behind the scenes stuff that needs to go into a podcast or any social media stuff, had a little brother that was looking to kind of get into some of this type of work, Josh, and you had connected me with Caleb. This is probably almost 2 years ago now. Caleb connected me with Josh. So Josh is the one that does all my video stuff. Now, Caleb has since started helping me with some other things behind the scenes, but
behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, all I know is Caleb called me up and says, Erik, I quit. I want to be an entrepreneur like you and Wes, because he was inspired by you. And so then, you stole him from me. But what's really, just joking aside, what's awesome, I just had a conversation with him a couple of days ago because I needed some stuff done. And I said, how are things going?
Yeah.
And he's like, great. And then he started telling me about the things that he's doing. And he took a risk. He quit a steady paycheck and is doing great. And I've had that happen multiple times with employees like that. And they know, they come to work for me. It's not just working to get a paycheck. Like, get in here, learn something, and go out and do something with it. And so,
and that's like the coolest feeling too. I mean, it's a little bit inconvenient at times, right? Because you've got this great person on your team and now you've got to replace them. But at the same time, it's, especially in the line of work that we're in, it's the biggest compliment you can get, right? Where someone's kind of watching you, seeing what you're doing, and then actually taking that and putting it into practice in their own lives. So yeah, Caleb and his brother Josh are working together on some stuff. I know, numerous clients that they're doing work for, and they do an amazing job. I wouldn't have the time or the energy to even begin to do anything with these podcasts other than sit down and have the conversation. So
before Caleb was working with me, it was Michael. Caleb was my right-hand guy. And then before him, it was Michael was my right-hand guy. And Michael and I talk probably once a quarter. And he's always like, Erik, I'm so grateful for that time working with you. And then he's gone on to do some really cool things. So it's neat.
With your Sola salons, right? Didn't the guy running those go on to become a franchisee?
Running those quit working for us and started his own franchises, which is, again, is awesome. So like, I love seeing that. I love people that are getting a job, don't just see it as a job, but they see it as learning a skill, and seeing how they're managed and then do something with it. And so there's, those are 3 entrepreneurs that used to be employees of mine that are now, all of them are doing very well as entrepreneurs. So like you said, it's the best feeling. So I had to give you a hard time, but at the same time, it's really cool. So like, anybody out there in a job, like, you should, I see people in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group. They'll be like, hey, what should I do? I want to get involved in a business or a franchise. I'm young, don't have experience. And people give really good advice. Like, go work for somebody and learn something from them, and then get to know people and connections and all. Caleb, this, as we just think about it, Caleb had connections like working for me, you and other people. Same with Michael. Michael had some connections to be able to get out and do his own thing, and then actually went a completely different route. And then Mirko, he wouldn't have been able to do it if he didn't have those connections. He combined his connections in the real estate world with connections in the franchising world, and was able to raise money to do his own franchises, which is awesome.
Brilliant.
Still has those today.
Yeah, but without that exposure, to the franchise side of it, may have been a path that he never ended up going down. And I mean, we were just chatting before we started recording on
meaning 45 minutes of talking.
Yeah, we were like, maybe we should actually record a podcast too. But the power of networking and building a network, and how in turn that makes you more valuable to the other people that you're around. Because I think a lot of people don't do this the right way when they think about networking. They're always thinking about what's in it for me. I want to get to that person because I want to get something from them, or they can help me level up. And that's probably always a part of someone's intention for networking. But like, you're probably the best networker I know, and you're also one of the best people at making sure you're giving value. And there's no doubt in my mind those two things go hand in hand. You're very well networked because you understand the importance of transferring as much value as you can before you ever ask or expect anything in return.
I will not give names. I'll give numbers. Either I'll give names or numbers, and I'll give numbers on this because I had a conversation with somebody 2 days ago about this kind of thing. I'm like, man, you're such a good networker. And he reminded me of something, but I connect. I said, hey, you're in Nashville and you're in Nashville. Let me get you both connect. One was from Austin, one was from Nashville. I'm like, let me get you guys connected because you have a short period of time where you could probably meet each other in Franklin. And so I got these two connected. One probably making $10 million in their mastermind in business. The other one is making, I believe he's going to have gross about 15 and net about 11 this year, 11 million. So I'm like, hey, you guys are both really good friends of mine. You guys need to meet. Yeah. And they only had about a half an hour to meet, but they knew if I was making that introduction that they should really try to meet. And they did. And one of them was actually coaching with Michael Hyatt. I don't know if you know who Michael Hyatt is.
I know the name. Yeah.
Yep. So he was coaching with Michael, and he's like, hey, this other guy who lives in Franklin, you should come to this meeting. I'll bring Michael with me. And then Michael's like, hey, oh, you have a lake house on this house? And he's like, yeah, I'm on this street. And they're on the same street where they both have lake houses. And these aren't little lake houses, little cabins.
I'm sure not.
These are beautiful.
Franklin,
but now
Tennessee.
they're friends. And then so I asked my one friend, I'm like, dude, you are so good at networking. He's like, Erik, the best thing about networking, and it goes to your point, he's like, you connect to people and you don't want anything in return, but yet you're the person that networked them. He's like,
yeah, there's at least no expectation, right? It's just this kind of understanding that it'll all come back around at some point, right? It may not be always a direct reciprocation, but if you're just genuinely trying to make good connections and help people out, it's always going to come back around at some point in some way.
That's it. And we had one of our brands today. It's like, hey, we're thinking about hiring this marketing agency to do some stuff for us. I'm like, well, what's the name? Jeff Herr sent that to me in a text. I'm like, well, I've never heard of that. Let me see. And then I sent two people, very well-respected people in franchising and especially in the marketing space. Have you heard of these people? And they're like, no, I've never heard of them. So, and they didn't have any names on the website. So my thought is either they're really good because, they're just kind of under the radar, but really good, or they're not really good and they're hiding some stuff. And I don't know what the answer is, but I do know the people that can help me get to the right answer. So I found out who the founders are, and now I can do some recon. But my immediate thing is I'm not going to go Google and research everything. I'm just going to go directly to some friends of mine. And
exactly. That's a really good example. So speaking of your brands, let's give a quick reminder to the audience of who you are. By the way, you're the first person to three-peat on the Path to Freedom podcast. So, and one of the, speaking of, you giving advice and always being a value add, you were probably the first person I called for advice when I was thinking about starting a podcast. And you were very generous with your time and advice, and have continued to be since then. So thank you for that. But yeah, first person to three-peat. I'm pretty certain in that. There's been a handful of people that have been on twice, but pretty sure you're the first three-peater, which is really cool. But part of that's because you're always up to really cool stuff. And since the last time you were on, I think last time you were on was probably almost 2 years ago. You had just gotten back from Ukraine, or the border.
Okay, that's right.
You were over there, helping out. And, I had a chance to talk to you after you got back, and I was like, dude, let's do a podcast on this and just tell people what you've been doing. And, the fact that you're an entrepreneur and have all these different revenue streams is what puts you in a position to kind of pick up short notice, go halfway across the world, and spend the better part of a month or so helping out people in need. You've been up to a lot since then, right? And for those watching this, you got your new company's hat on, Front Street Equity Partners. So let's talk about Front Street Equity Partners. What are you guys doing over there, and how did it kind of come about?
I think it was around that time I went to Poland, was on the border. We are really just helping. I was kind of eyes and ears on the ground for some sex trafficking stuff that happens in situations like that. And so Front Street was in its infancy there. There were three of us partners, me, Jeff Herr, and Jim Jaggers, that had kind of all exited at different times in the past, year, 2 years. And we're like, what do we want to do next? Because we could all go
All with the
we could do
background in
all with the
franchising, right? That was
background in
kind of the
franchising.
common
Yeah,
tie.
we all had deep backgrounds in franchising, different but very like strong backgrounds in franchising for almost about 20 years each. And we're like, what do we want to do next? Like and it really came down to, what do we enjoy? Because if we're going to do this, probably the last thing that we do, maybe the last thing that we do in franchising, what do we want to do? And we knew one thing, it had to be something that we all found enjoyable.
Yeah.
And not a grind. We didn't want to grind. And we wanted things that would to take from our experiences in franchising, things to do things better and to do things differently, and to do things that were kind of aligned with the brand. And so we had a lot of conversations. First and foremost, we're strategic advisors. And really what that looks like is we help the brand from where they are today to a successful exit in a period of time, wherever they're going to have that successful exit, or the founder decides they want to exit, or it just makes sense. But it's all founder led. They get to make that decision. We don't, but we help them get to that where they are today to a very good place in business where they can exit. And we kind of do that in a compressed time frame. In other words, where a brand might need 10 years to get to that point where they could reach a certain amount of money for that exit value, we want to do that in probably a third of the time. And that leads it's an option for them, because a lot of times when you are growing at a good, healthy rate, and you're going up and to the right, it's a good time to sell versus, when you start to peak or something like that.
Or plateau
there's
even.
so there's times when you want that inflection point and it just makes sense to exit. And there's times when the franchisor, the founder, is not ready to continue to do it. Maybe they have other things to do, or they life changes, or they're just, they're not the right person to lead to that next phase of that company. So that's really, in essence, what we do. There's a lot that is packed into advising a brand from where they are today to an exit, but we are in the trenches helping them every step of the way. Like we'll get on phone calls on a Saturday and a Sunday with these brands. Emergency comes up, let's deal with it. We are with them every step of the way.
Yeah, it seems like you're really well positioned to kind of customize your services and your level of involvement with a brand based on where that brand is, and what they really need, and where they're maybe not as strong. Because I know out of the brands you're partnered with today, some of them you're helping out with everything from lead generation in terms of new franchisee sales to the actual, franchise sales process. Whereas others, it's more of a bigger picture, strategic kind of partnership, and they already have some of those other pieces in place internally. So, and to me, that's interesting because you know there's been a lot of these what we call FSOs or franchise sales organizations pop up over the last 5 or 6 years, and a lot of them are all very similar in the sense that they just sign with a brand that they think has big growth
Yep.
potential, and they help them sell a lot of units in a very short period of time. But there's not as much emphasis on the strategy piece of it. There's not as much emphasis on, hey, is this brand operationally sound and in a position to support all of these new franchisees that they're bringing on. Seems like you guys are much more strategic in nature. But talk on that point a little
Yeah.
bit. Not that I'm comparing you to an FSO, but like, where are the areas that you guys would really say you differ the most from some of these firms that a brand could partner with just to help sell more franchises?
I'll go back just a little bit because at first we just really focused on that strategic advisory, and we didn't have any brands yet, but we also are either going to manage that relationship with that salesperson that they have, that franchise development person, or manage that relationship with an FSO. And then we're like, what would be ideal is to offer our in-house FSO where we are aligned with the brand on bringing in the right candidates and growing at a pace that is right for the brand at the stage that they're in that particular year or quarter.
Yep.
So and then we looked around the room, me, Jeff, and Jim. Like Jeff and I were like, we could sell. We could get back into franchise development because we'd done it before. We were pretty dang good at it.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to do that. We just didn't excite us.
It's a
So
big
we're like, we
time
better
commitment. And it's kind
big
of going
time
back to that grind that you had said
going
you
back to the
guys
grind.
knew you wanted to
Yeah.
avoid.
Yeah, we wanted to avoid that. We're we went on a search and we ended up bringing in a fourth partner, equal partner, Bobby Brennan, who was with an FSO before and really helped that FSO out, well-known FSO.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good FSOs out there.
Yeah.
But we wanted to bring in, so Bobby became a part of the team. So we have Front Street, it's basically Front Street, the franchise sales arm of it. And we do that only for our brands. We won't do it. We're not doing it for anybody else, but just for our brands. And the reason that we offer that to our brands is because it's hard to find good salespeople, and we've been there, done that before. So
Yep.
the difference that we've found now, like we're actually doing it and we're in it. We are very we get somebody that wants to buy a 12 pack or a 20 pack or however big it is. We're much more like, are we sure we want this? And we
Yeah.
talked to the founder, and we're like, we're much more concerned about these people opening versus trying to get a deal done or a deal of a certain
Yeah. On
size
paper,
done.
it looks great, sounds great, but 3 years into that, you could feel very differently and wish that you wouldn't have sold that much to one person. I mean, that's such a good example because I'm sure some people listening to this are like, okay, Erik, you guys have franchise experience. That's great. But how are you going to take a brand and, cut the timeline down to a third of what it would typically take for them to build the brand to the point to where they could exit if they wanted to? And getting the franchise sales or franchise recruiting process right in turn, just the process, right? Especially for a young brand that doesn't have a lot of franchisees yet, it's challenging to sell franchises, even more challenging to bring in the right types of franchisees. And that's where a lot of brands really almost implode before they have a chance to really get going, is because they got some bad apples in that first bunch of franchisees and kind of ruins it for everyone. So to me, that's like the perfect example of where you guys can bring your experience and knowledge, and then a guy like Bobby, who I know pretty well. And I mean, talk about a guy that understands the franchise sales and the franchise buying process, and how to, effectively, but also very transparently take someone through that due diligence process that they should be going through as they evaluate a franchise. Um, that's just an area that the vast majority of brands need us so much help in. And
It's
there's so
easy to
many
stick it.
landmines that they could step on.
And as we talk to at least 150 brands a year, and the common language that we hear from them is, we don't know what we don't know. And then we start finding out what they do know and what they've done with what they think they know, and we're like, shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't have one territory in Austin. You shouldn't have sold, the state of, Texas to one person. Why are your
Yeah.
franchise fees so low?
Yeah.
And they think low franchise fees mean better for the franchisee. And while having, the mindset is helping them on cash flow is better for the franchisee, that's true. But what about the franchisor helping the franchisee getting an ROI on their investment? Like, let's do that versus trying to, penny pinch for the franchisee. So,
Yeah.
we're always thinking, how can new franchisees, existing franchisees, ROI on whatever it is, the royalty, the payment, what the fees, whatever it is. And what's interesting, Wes, some people in franchising can get jaded because, they get mad at their franchisor because their franchisor was doing this or doing that, or they just want more money or whatnot. Talking to so many brands that we'll never work with, but we help out a little bit. They care so much about their franchisees.
Yeah.
And they're like, we want help to help our franchisees. They don't want to partner with Front Street just to line their pockets. Although, there's a part that's part of it, to have a nice exit,
Yeah.
but they care about their franchisees and they care about their franchisees' success. And it's so refreshing to be on the front end of a brand where their founders are just obsessed with franchisee success and health and happiness, and while they grow that brand. So that's something I think that's probably surprising for me, that so many brands, so many founders really care about their
Yeah, they're
franchisees as
not just looking at their franchisees as,
well.
a cash register for themselves.
No,
And yeah, I mean, I've seen it with brands that, are smaller and the founders intimately involved, and they've got, very strong personal relationships with the franchisees. And so yeah, they really want to see them succeed. You know, one of the brands we own, we got the brand got acquired by this big conglomerate about 3 years ago that owns a lot of brands. And let me tell you what, there's none of that, right? We went from like knowing the founder and CEO and, texting with him on a regular basis, like considered him a friend as well as a mentor and a business partner, to now the CEO is just a guy that has worked for this company for 25 years and he's a company man. And there's none of that. And I'm not saying they don't care, but they don't care the way the founder of
very
that
different,
brand cared.
very different.
Very different.
One of the things that I think that sets us apart too, and it's just the way that we like to do business, is we don't charge any retainers. So there's no monthly fee that they pay us. It's all performance based. It's charged like a typical FSO. Our big paydays at the end, when the brand has a nice payday themselves, we
I'm
get
gonna
a
say,
cut of
because
our
it's, I mean, it's in your name. You're equity partners with them,
Yep.
right? You're taking a piece of the company, which is that mutual alignment, right? And I
That's
think
it.
that's important because, performance based is great, but when we're talking franchising, and if the performance metric is number of franchises sold and nothing beyond that, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's long-term alignment between the sales organization and the brand, right? Because brand just wants to get as many franchisees in as they can. It's the franchisor's problem what happens to those franchisees once they've signed, right? um you guys are long-term partners, and as you said, your opportunity for a bigger payday comes if and when there's a successful exit for the founders, which means you're very, very motivated and very, very aligned to make sure not only are you helping them grow and helping them add franchises, but doing it with the right people that are going to be successful long term with the brand.
That's it. And I think a lot of these brands, one of the things that you always kind of know, you really want a good founder, you want a good jockey. And I think that's just becoming more and more, it's very important to us. I'll just say that it's very important to us. That founder is key. And as you and I, we listen to all kinds of different podcasts and read different stuff out there. And when I hear someone talk about how important the jockey is, I listen to that, and I want to learn from somebody that's talking about the jockey and not just the horse. Because I was listening, I think it was the All In podcast, which is a great podcast. They were talking about that because those guys do a lot of investment more on the tech side of things, but they're talking about the jockey.
Yeah.
But we're the same when we are talking to brands. We're like, this founder, some of these founders, Wes, they don't even want to be a franchisor anymore. They're just like, I've got 5 franchisees and I hate them all. We're like, this is not going to be a good thing for us.
Yeah.
Or they're like, we don't really want to work in the business. Like, we just want a good payday. We're like, if the founder's not all in, if they're not passionate about their brand, if they're not all in, and they're not ready to sacrifice. Here's the thing: these founders that we like, they're like, we will sacrifice a payday for ourselves in the short term to build something that's strong in the long term.
Yeah, they're playing the long game.
Yep, they're playing the long game. And so when we hear a founder that's like, I haven't paid myself in 2 years while I've been building this thing because there's not money to pay myself. Everything's going out. Well, we're building a big brand here. That's why, we like founders like that are just involved. And, we're dealing with one right now. She's got Discovery Day. We're going out to a Discovery Day out at her place next week sometime. And then she's got 2 other ones back to back. And then we were talking to another founder that's one of our brands. And she's like, guys, we're doing another Discovery Day. She's like, it's like, you guys aren't even going to be here. It's the first one without you guys because it was a kind of a one-off. And so we were teasing her like, no, this is a VIP Discovery Day because it's all founder.
Yeah.
But they are all in. They're doing whatever it takes to win and to win for their franchisee. So I love that.
If you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. So when you talk about whatever it takes, like what in your experience, what are the couple of things that the founder should really be focused on and spending most of their time on? And then, what are the things that the founder should be delegating and is not going to be the best use of their time? Because I think this is another pitfall that a lot of founders probably fall into, is they're trying to wear too many hats. and they're not always spending their time on the things that they can have the most impact on. So to you, like, what are those things that the founder and only the founder is really in a position to focus on and delegate everything else?
So I'm holding up a book and I'm just keeping this on my desk, Rocket Fuel, because I want founders to understand who they are. Like all of our founders are visionaries. They are definitely visionaries. In the book Rocket Fuel, the EOS model, there's visionaries and integrators, or visionaries and operators,
Yeah.
and they need to understand each other. So I want a founder that understands that they are there to make really smart decisions, and they are there to hire people that are smarter than them in all kinds of areas. And they've kind of done everything up to a certain point, including operations. And most founders are not like the most amazing at operations. So I
Yeah.
love it when a founder's
No.
like, hey, like I want to bring in a fractional COO, or bring on a full-time COO or director of operations. And then I want a founder that can empower that person and not micromanage that person. And so we look for that in our founders. We want someone that can identify good talent and let that talent take over, and not micromanage them. Look for founders that can handle conflict. As
Yeah.
conflict comes up
That's
in
important.
with maybe it's with us, maybe it's with their C-level leadership or vendors or franchisees, and if they can handle conflict, that's always a really good thing. Because once you get
Yeah.
someone that just hides from conflict, or they're always looking for conflict, you don't want that. That's going to be a challenge for a brand if you have a founder that is like that. So those are some of the things that we're looking for. um Founders that are just, they love their business. Like they want to see their name everywhere, and they want to have a good name. They're obsessed with client satisfaction. They want a high net promoter score. They want happy employees. They want happy franchisees. They want to, they can see the big picture as well. We can lay out the timeline. We can lay out what it's going to take to get from here, and how the staff grows, and how you need to hire different vendors, and the dollars keep adding up. As you look at that, the dollars keep adding up.
Yeah.
And they're focused on the prize, which is either good cash flow at a certain point, or it is an exit. And either way is a win for us at Front Street, whether they are just going to continue to cash flow that brand, or they are going to have an exit. But if they can just keep their eye on the prize, and have that longer term, medium term focus to get through the first year, 2, 3, 5 years to get to that point, that's another thing that we look for.
Yeah. Because either way, it requires long-term vision and discipline, on the founder's part, especially when it comes to their expectations for what they're going to get compensated. Because, what a lot of people don't realize with franchising, number one, the franchise fees are usually not a profit center for the franchisor. The initial franchise fees that someone pays when they sign and become a franchisee. And like right now, I believe all the brands you guys are partnered with are brick and mortar concepts of
Real brick and
some
mortar.
variety, right? So when you have that, you're signing a franchise, you're getting them open in all likelihood somewhere between 6 to 12 months after they've signed, right? So the real revenue stream for any franchisor is the royalties, which is a percentage of revenue, right? So like even from day one of selling franchises, it's a pretty long tell before you have any revenue coming in from those franchises. And then obviously you have to train, support the franchisees in a manner so that they can grow and scale the business to a point where, your royalty, your small percentage of their total revenue is amounting to anything meaningful. So this is not a get rich quick
Oh,
strategy at all, but you need, and like, I mean, especially lately in the news, there's just been so many stories of founders of brands getting very, very wealthy from exiting. But so I think a lot of people probably see that. I would imagine that's spurred a lot of interest in people that have business to say, well, man, maybe we should be thinking about franchising. Did you see the type of multiple that that company got when they sold their brand? They were a franchise. Um, so I could see there being maybe some disillusions amongst some
Yeah.
founders in terms of like how quickly their financial well-being is going to change after they start franchising the business. I want to ask you about this. How important do you think it is for a founder to be a personality, like someone that can build a personal brand alongside of the brand to help grow the brand, right? So think about like Fit Body Boot Camp, right? We're both fans of Bedros
Yep.
Keuilian, and I think you know Bedros a little
I
bit.
do.
Like I would argue that Fit Body Boot Camp is where it is today because Bedros built his personal brand and then brought Fit Body Boot Camp along with him. And there's other examples of that out there. Is that something you guys look for, or is that just kind of a nice to have if it happens to be there in addition to everything else that you're looking for?
I think it's nice to have because I think it's hard to find that. Yeah, I'm friends with Bedros. I have a lot of respect for him, and he's spent a lot of time, money, and energy on his personal brand, and he's got a great personal brand, and I've learned a lot from him. So he's a friend, and he's a great guy. And what was cool about Bedros is he was able to step aside and let
Yeah,
Bryce come in and take that thing over, which is really smart for him
yeah,
because Bedros is a pure visionary. But like if we could have a brand with we were looking at some brands that had some pretty big personality like that, like a good personal brand. We're like, boy, this person would be a great face of the brand. And I don't think we're going to move forward to that brand, but we loved that because you can do so much with that on social
yeah,
media
yeah.
and whatnot. So I think that's a bonus for us because
Could also create some challenges that you don't have there with someone that's not as big of a
yes,
personality at the helm.
and the other thing, it creates a challenge on the exit because
Yeah,
sometimes if the brand's been built around a personality, it's really hard. And I would imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine that's part of it with Bedros. If he ever did want an exit, it can't be built around him. And that's a lot with these online influencers and these personalities online. They make a lot of money. They're really good, but it's them and they are the brand. So it's not nearly as sellable. And it goes to your point, like, with a lot of people are hearing big multiples on these franchise brands. The latest big one I heard is a 30x. I hadn't heard of 30x, but
I haven't
a
heard 30,
friend of mine, a friend of
25.
mine, yeah, a friend of mine said he sold at 30x to a big family of brands. And it wasn't making like a $500,000 or $1 million a year. It got caught on this where it's just rocket ship growth. It was that inflection point, and that's
Yeah,
what you want to look for, and that's when you can get that higher multiple. When there's a lot that goes into that, but when we look at helping our brands get to that point, we look at online sales, we look at all kinds of different things that are revenue streams besides just the royalty. And by the way, revenue streams that don't hurt franchisees. Like we are not a fan, and our brands aren't a fan of revenue streams that hurt the franchisee. But
yeah. I
there's a
like how
lot of
you
way.
how you put it earlier. We said ROI for the
Yeah,
franchisee's investment, right? So that's the upfront investment, but also their ongoing investments in
yeah.
the fees that they're paying. Any fees they're paying shouldn't hurt the bottom line. It should help.
We also look at Dave Ramsey too, to go back to like a personality. Dave Ramsey has a massive business that's not very sellable. But then
Yeah,
he like realized this is not very sellable and it's not going to live much longer when he goes away, when he passes away. And
yeah,
so that's when they started to shift and to do these different personalities within the Dave Ramsey brand,
yep,
and that was very intentional. So I've been around around a lot of these influencers, and it's great. It's great to get stuff on the front end and for them to do selling coaching programs and masterminds and all this, but it's not nearly as sellable. So that's why I don't know that it's as important for a franchisor. Now, I do think what's interesting are people like Drew Brees and others that are coming in, and they
yeah,
are part of other brands. And Drew, I think you're friends with some of Drew's business partners, and
Yeah.
they just actually bought a pickleball concept, and they're doing
Yeah.
that together. And they're and Drew, I think, you get a personality that's part of your brand. Now Drew did something else with another friend of mine in their brand. And I just saw that happen. So I think I would rather, probably, if I'm wanting to have some influence, I'd probably like bring people like that into the
Yeah, like
brand.
partner with someone that can leverage their personal brand and their following, but that the business is not necessarily built around.
Yeah.
They're just coming in like as an addition to it.
Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah,
Because it's not
and
all built around them. And then,
yeah,
and then it's a contract. There's a contract with that person, and it comes, whatever that looks like. And then you can always do another one that works. Let's do another one. So private equity comes in, and they're like, oh, what? Because private equity wants to increase value once they take it over. And what
yeah.
levers can they pull? Oh, they can get Drew Brees number 2 or number 3, and increase things a certain way,
Look at
or however they want
Papa
to do it.
John's is a really good
Yeah.
example of that. Like I started doing a short little segment where I'm just doing like a quick spotlight of like celebrity or professional athletes that have done a lot in franchising. So I just did one on Shaquille O'Neal. And in part of my research for that, I forget the number of units, but he owns some Papa John's franchises, and
Yep.
he's a pretty seasoned
Yeah, he is.
franchise investor at this point. But in addition to however many, Papa John's locations he owns and the money that he makes off of that, he signed an $8.5 million contract with Papa John's for them to use his name and likeness to help market the brand. They've done it with Peyton Manning. They've done it with, a lot of other professional athletes that are involved as franchisees. So that's really, I mean, it's working in their favor, but it's working in Papa John's favor too, because they're getting these high profile franchisees, helping them grow the brand, but then they're using their name, their likeness, their following
Yep.
to
As,
market
as
the
leverage,
yeah.
massive leverage.
Yeah.
Um, One of the other things probably are, just to kind of wrap up, like what we look for in founders, because go back and listen to this. Everything that I said, what we look for in founders, is what buyers should look for in founders as well. So we've been talking about like what we look for, but it's the same thing. If I was a buyer, that I would be looking for. And kind of one of the most important things that I didn't mention, is we want them to be teachable and coachable. We want them to be humble. We
Mm.
want them to, like, we love it when they say, we don't know what we don't know. And we want to learn from you guys. And it's the shortcut. We're the easy button. We're the shortcut. We're not the only easy button or shortcut out there, because there's other people that
No.
know the types of things that we know. But if we're working with this a brand, like, and they're teachable and coachable, which is what we want, then we can really quickly look at something and like, your franchise fee is too low. Let's change it. Your territories are too big. Let's change it. Or maybe your territories are not big enough because
Mhm.
you're not taking into account how big your actual personal locations are and the reach that they have. You probably need to have bigger territories to have a more accurate item 19 in the FDD. So let's get that fixed.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things, that teachable and coachable is really high on our list. So if you're listening to this and you're a buyer, go back and listen to the list and the things that Wes and I were talking about that we look for, as Wes and I look for in founders, that we're like, oh, this is a great founder, because you want that founder. You'll be living with them for, probably not the rest of your life as a franchisee there, because they will probably be gone at some point.
Yeah.
But you're going to be there for a while you build your business. And I would say, let's say you go to a private equity company after that, and it might be a good one, it might be a bad one, but it really doesn't. I mean, at that point,
Doesn't
you
matter
got
so
your
much.
business. It doesn't,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not going to impact it that much one way
Yeah.
or the other.
Spot on. That's like, because I've heard people kind of on the other end of this piece of advice you're giving, saying don't pick a brand based on the founder, because there's a good likelihood that that founder's exit stage left at some point,
Yep.
which is true. But your point is, whoever's at the helm when you're getting started as a franchisee is going to be much more influential on, whether you're successful or not than when you're a 5 or 6 year franchisee that's got it figured out, and now the original founder's out and private equity comes in. Like, I mean, the example I gave with our brand, you know, we're coming up on 6 years of owning that. So we were pretty established, pretty good at the business already when that acquisition happened. Like, it hasn't hurt us. You know, it's just different now, but it doesn't really matter in terms of our business's success, our profitability, our livelihood that comes from that business. Um, you know, but the value we got from the founder when we were just getting started and we were brand new, invaluable. So yeah, that's an
It's like a
interesting.
grand opening. We're obsessed at Front Street. We're obsessed with our franchisees in our brands having really good grand openings because
Mhm.
it's hard to overcome a weaker grand opening. And I'm not saying all of ours are going to have amazing grand openings, but it's something that we're very focused and obsessed on, so we can help them get better and better. The next grand opening should be better than the last one. That's how we look at it. And so the same thing for a franchisee. If you're early on in a brand, you want to have the best chance to get to have a really good start. And that's what that founder is going to do. They're going to make good decisions. They're going to have good people around them. They're going to be teachable. They're going to be coachable. They're going to realize their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and hire for their weaknesses and focus on their strengths to give you that first 2 or 3 or 5 years as a jump start. So it doesn't matter if good private equity or bad private equity comes in, it's not going to matter much one way or the other because you have already got a start.
Yeah.
And so yeah, this is a good conversation. I mean, we
Yeah.
started out with a 45-minute conversation on ice baths and
I
stuff
know. That
privately,
was
and now
that was
here
a
we
good
are. This is like a
conversation
fun
too.
conversation.
This will we'll have to launch like a separate biohacking podcast or channel or something where we can riff on that sort of thing, as it's fun too. But the last thing I want to ask you is, these brands that you're working with, that you're talking to, are most of them brand new to franchising, like just getting started, haven't sold a franchise yet, have a handful? I know one of the brands you're working with right now is a little further along
Yeah.
in terms of number of franchises that they have open and that they've sold. Like, do you guys have a sweet spot that you're looking for? Is it really just about, opportunity for you guys to plug in and add value?
I would say it's opportunity to plug in and add value. If you pin me down for a number, I'd say less than 100. One of our brands
Oh, okay.
they didn't even have, like, they hadn't sold any franchises. We came in and they're
Yeah.
like, it's great. You haven't sold any. Now we got a fresh slate. And that brand has been attracting some of the most high quality, just amazing caliber of franchisee. It's just absolutely
Yeah,
amazing.
you were telling me
Really,
that, which I was kind
yeah.
of not like surprised to hear, but it was cool to hear. Do you want to share the brands that you're partnered with currently?
Yeah, that brand that I just shared about attracting amazing franchisees is called GoGlow, GOGLOW,
Yeah.
and it's like boutique, airbrush, tanning, spray tan, healthy. It's like a skincare company, but in the tanning space. So Mel is the founder of that and has, like, the franchisees are just coming from like European Wax, which is a great, strong brand, sold out
Yeah.
around the country. So
Yeah.
don't even bother going to look because it's sold out. But when you get brand franchisees from brands like that, and there franchisees from other brands there too, but high net worth individuals are flocking to that brand. Like,
Yeah, that
literally,
says
I get,
something when it's
yeah,
attracting, and not just attracting like, oh, interesting concept, let me go take a look at it. No, not for me. They're signing their franchisees.
yep.
These are sophisticated, experienced operators. They know what they want in a franchise. For someone on my side of the table, I hear those types of stories. You've got my attention, right? Like, I know
I got
that's a brand to be
a
watching.
100%. That's how I was too.
Yeah.
Then they've got, I don't think that they're closed yet, and they're not really a franchisee, but it's an organic lead. And they're with one of the top wellness franchises, like a large wellness franchise, and they are the top franchisee there from
Oh, wow.
size and just respect and making money. They're the best.
Yeah.
So they're coming on board. So that's fun. But she didn't have any franchises, and then we got involved with that. The other one's Magnolia Soap and Bath. we like that one. They had I think they had about 30 open
Yeah.
and a lot in development.
That's
And
a cool business.
yeah, it's a cool one. This is just it's such a great, and she loves the product, and she's just one of those founders that's just all in as well. But that's attracting a lot of they got a lot a diverse group of franchisees of other brands, and they've got some amazing numbers on that one. That's all on the item 19. You know all about that, as
Yeah.
you've dug into that. But that one is just steady and growing, and in small towns. And so that was super
Yeah.
interesting to us too, because like, oh man, it started out in a town of like 5,000 people or less,
Yeah.
and
Like
it did what kind
Mississippi
of
or somewhere
numbers?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so it works in small markets, which reminds me of the tax business. The tax business, we were in small markets. And so we liked that. And then the other one that we have is Hawaii Fluid Art, and that founder is all, and she's obsessed with her employees and customers and just the brand and the culture. And they
He
have
was just on
about,
the podcast.
yeah, Maya. And
Yeah. She's
so
great.
they have, think, can't remember how many it is right now, but by the end of the year, they will have, they'll probably double what they started the year at, and probably be close to 80 to 100
I think she had
franchises
said
open.
shooting to have around 100 open by the end of the year. And cool business. Yeah, she was great to talk to on the podcast. I mean, I had a couple of people reach out to me like right after hearing the podcast, and they're over there looking at it now.
People,
So
and she's the
it's
one that I mentioned earlier, like, oh, we have a discovery day and it's full, and there's still people that wanted to come. And so she's doing two other discovery days back to back right after that one. And
yeah,
what I love about her too is success in her first location. And then she's like, I have something here. And then she started one up in Kansas City to make sure that it was kind of good all around. And so again, delayed gratification, not thinking you have lightning in a bottle, but
yeah.
let's test it and see how it works. And so I love a founder that's ready to do that, not ready just to think like, oh, I've got it, let's go franchise this thing. Because man, there are many companies out there will say it's franchisable, let's franchise this thing, because they make their
Mhm.
money franchising mom and pop businesses. But someone with the patience to do that is great. And they'll probably be, yeah, they'll, I said 80 because I kind of like to be on the safe side sometimes, but 80 to 100 by the end of the year. And so
Yeah.
that's going to be a fun one. So I'm going out to Vegas next week, and I'll be at my first discovery day, and I'll get my first art deal done. I'll have to
Well,
show it to you,
we'll
and I'll put
probably
it
see
back
it
in
on the
our next
wall
podcast.
behind you. Yeah,
Yeah.
next time we talk, that'll be a
And if you
nice
don't, it's because it was a disaster. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, she told me that it's like almost impossible to mess one of these things up because if they see that it's not going to come out so well, they come over and they give you a little extra attention and help you get it to where it's at least something you want to take home with you. But
Wes, you just destroyed it for me, because I was thinking I'll be the guy that's like I'm be screwing it up. I don't know I'm going to screw it up. And they'll be like, oh, Erik, let me help you. So I'll probably get all kinds of attention, but I'll know why I'm
now
getting that
you'll know,
attention,
yeah,
not
now
thinking
you'll
they
be
just
like,
wanted to hang out with me.
dang it, Wes, you you ruined this for me. Yeah, it's a good group of brands. I know you guys are talking to a lot of other brands, and I'm sure over the course of the next 6 months or so, we'll be hearing some cool announcements of new brands that you guys have partnered with. So
So let me
um
say this to your listeners. Like, if you
yeah,
hear me talk about these brands, or anybody talk about brands on Wes's podcast, you need to instant message him, DM him, email him, do something. Is like, hey, I've just heard about this on your podcast, Wes. I want to know about this brand, because I know that you can immediately kind of tell them if it's available or not available, and can really direct them in the best way. But like, the worst thing is going to, not the worst, but a thing that a lot of people do is they just go onto the website right away and just start typing stuff in, and then they're disappointed because it's not really available, or things like, hey, they're about ready to sell this. And so you can kind of help people out without them wasting a bunch of time. So
yeah,
I
you can
needed to say
fast
that,
track.
Wes.
Well, I very much appreciate it because that does happen. And look, if I can help a brand get on some people's radar and they go straight to the brand, that's great. But definitely I can save a few steps, let them know if territory is available, we've also been in this line of work long enough, Eric. We know that a lot of times people are attracted to a brand because of the widget, but doesn't always mean it's the right franchise for them either. And so that's where, someone like myself can really, help and add value is, hey, let's talk through what your goals are, what you really want to get out of owning a franchise. And then that's going to give us what we need to put some really strong options in front of you. And it very well could be that one of these brands you heard about on a podcast that piqued your interest is one of those options, but it's not always necessarily the case. So
Yep.
I'm
100%.
happy to talk to anyone that has questions or wants to learn more. And I know you are as well. And I want to make sure we remind people of your podcast, the Franchise Secrets podcast. You know, One of probably the best podcasts out there on franchising. You've got your Facebook group, a free Facebook group, mastermind groups. What else would you want to point people to if they want to
That's
check out
pretty
more?
good, man. Just go to franchisesecretsgroup.com if you want to get a cool Facebook group with good franchising people in there, buyers and franchisors
And
and
most of
franchise.
these people have so much else going on too, right? There's real estate investors. It's
Yeah.
just a lot of savvy people that are always looking
A
to
lot of good
learn
advice.
and
I don't let
grow.
riffraff in that group. I don't let riffraff in that group. The last thing is scalable franchise. If you want to just kind of see what my world's about, scalable franchise or Front Street EP. .com. Front Street EP is Front Street Equity Partners.
Yeah, we'll
But
link all
man,
that in the show notes to make it easy for people to find too. But Eric, man, appreciate you and all the time you've been willing to spend with me over the years and all the advice that you've given. And thanks for making time to come on and share some of your insight and knowledge with the audience as well.
the feeling's mutual. I love what you've done with the podcast. I love it when people can have access to really good information like what you give them, but then just being a stand-up guy, someone that's completely trustworthy, someone that's not in it just for a dollar, someone that has experience like you do with running franchises
Good
yourself.
and bad.
I was going to say good
Good
and
and
bad.
bad.
So that's
Yeah.
why you're one of the top brokers in the country. So I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, man. Much appreciated.